Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Joanne Kuntz. I'm an attorney and CPA. I'm here with my partner today, Marina Parkin. We are going to continue to bring you all of the latest developments as they unfold here with all of the coronavirus stimulus packages and things. So we wanted to get with you today, give you an update of what's happened. Last week, we talked to you, gave you an overview of PPP and EIDL and unemployment and Florida disaster bridge loan. Then we gave you some deep dive into PPP and EIDL and requirements and rules. We've done some things geared for our realtor partners. We've also gone through the PPP application line by line. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we'll be going through the EIDL application line by line, and that's for all businesses. That is not just for real estate agents. So the calculations are much more straightforward, so we felt like we could address all business owners on the or individuals on the EIDL program. No need to break it down by industry. So that being said, I'm going to flip it over to Marina and start the update.
Wonderful. I am not going to go into the detail of the overview as we did last week, so I'm just going to hit some of the main points that have changed that we found out about, and maybe some other comments on the things that we already knew. So let's start with the first one, the filing due date. Everybody knows July 15th. We're coming up on our favorite April 15th tomorrow, which I wish was my deadline.
It's like high school graduation with no pomp and circumstance. April 15th.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm a little sad about that because this will be yet another never-ending tax season. So it was a little bit weird because the first quarter estimated payment as well as the 2019 payment has been moved to July 15th, and up until last week they didn't say anything about the second quarter estimated payment, which is due June 15th. Well, they have moved that as well. So right now you've got July 15th as the deadline right now for your 2019 taxes, 2020 first quarter estimated payment, and 2020 second quarter estimated payment. So that's pretty important. There's been also an update on those involved in a 1031 exchange. If you've got deadlines, your 45 days to identify the property and 180 days to close on the property, if any of those dates fall between April 1st and July 14th, all of those dates have also been moved to July 15th. There's currently a petition with IRS to move some of those dates to encompass starting January, basically, not necessarily April. So if it affects you and you're not quite sure which days you fall into, just shoot us an email, we'll take a look. But that's also been a nice relief for those in the middle of the 1031 exchange. Super important for those that have installment payments. So as I told you last week, IRS said that they are suspending collection on installment payments as well as offer and compromise payments from now until July 15th. And they came out last week and said, well, if you're an auto withdrawal, so if the payment comes out of your bank account automatically, they have not gone in and automatically stopped the payment. So IRS said, we encourage you to contact your bank and put a stop payment on this payment series. For those that have contacted the bank said, we're not allowed to stop it's a government payment, it's an IRS payment, we're not allowed to put a stop payment. So now you've got the taxpayers that cannot afford to make this installment payment, and they really could use that relief for a few months. They are between the rock and a hard place. So I guess, right now there's no good system of doing it. Try, if you're in that particular situation and you're struggling to make installment payments, or you just want to put a stop on them, just try to keep calling IRS. Calling your bank is not going to do anything. But call IRS, it's 1-800-829-1040, that's their main line, and just try to get through. The article also suggested getting a taxpayer advocate involved. That whole system is very long time. By the time you get assigned to a taxpayer advocate, July 15th is going to be around the corner. So this is really for those that are, I think, struggling to make that installment payment. I just keep trying to call IRS. Recovery rebates, there's been a big update with those payments that IRS is sending you. That's the $1,200 for individual, $2,400 for married filing joint. They want to make sure that everybody knows. So let's say if you have an elderly parent where all they do is collect Social Security, and because of that, they've never filed a tax return, those people don't need to do anything. they're going to automatically get the $1,200 payment. So that's good. If you have been a filer, so let's say you may have had a child who never filed their own tax return, now they're not a dependent anymore, and they may have been under income threshold, or maybe you didn't make enough money in the last couple of years and you were under the filing threshold and you hadn't filed a tax return. So you definitely qualify for getting that stimulus payment. So IRS has set up a system now. It's a service, and if you go to their website, it's irs.gov, you will find something called non-filers enter payment info here. And essentially, this is for you to go in and enter your direct deposit information if IRS doesn't have anything on file for you, if you had not filed a tax return, and if they can't figure out what your AGI was, but it was so low you still qualify for this stimulus payment. This service also works for those that have filed tax returns that qualify for the check, but where IRS doesn't have your direct deposit info. They will mail you a check. It will just take longer. So they're encouraging everybody to go in there and put your direct deposit information so that they can send this check direct deposit. So again, you're going to irs.gov, and there's going to be a link that's called non-filers enter payment here, and that's their new system. They're also, from what I understand, are going to follow up when they send a payment with a letter to say, hey, we send you a payment, you qualify, we put it direct deposit, or here's your check, and please make sure you got it. That's how they're going to try to catch some of that identity theft. So big warning from IRS. Look out for phishing schemes, because now is the time with these payments that you're going to get emails, you're going to get text messages, you're going to get all sorts of stuff over the phone calls to say, please enter your banking information here, your social security number. That is all fake. IRS is not going to call you, email you.
They're not even going to answer when you call them, let alone
exactly.
call you.
Absolutely right. No text, no email, and no phone. It's up to you to contact them through the service or by phone to provide the direct deposit information. And then when they follow up with the letter that they've issued you the payment, that's when you know that you were actually getting the payment. So please don't enter your information anywhere other than irs.gov. Get enter information here service. Okay, so that's extremely important, because people are, so excited about these checks, and of course that's when you're going to get a lot of people taking advantage of that. So that is on the stimulus checks.
Before you move on to the stimulus, before you move on for the stimulus package, we have a question. If you are in an installment plan that's auto deducted, would they still be going to the non-filer category to enter their info, or will the IRS know their info because of the auto payment on the?
Correct. So this is only for people that have never had any direct deposit information. That's not to say it's going to work as smooth as this, because I think this is all going to be a big mess, and don't be surprised if you get a check instead of having direct deposit, or vice versa. At this point, nothing is surprising. They are also telling people to be patient. It may take months to get these checks. There's some sort of rhyme and reason to this madness. They will probably start with the lower earners first, and then get up to the higher threshold to what's allowed. So I would anticipate, they're saying it's going to go through the fall. So I would say, I would say this is going to take a little while for them to do. I wanted to highlight a couple of unemployment questions. As we mentioned to you guys before, we are not, we don't typically practice in the area of unemployment. Now, especially now with the unemployment being completely new, where you as the independent contractor, self-employed individual can now apply, there's been a lot of questions. We have a couple of different answers. We're also going to try and bring in a labor attorney to one of these webinars, and she will be a great resource to ask for any unemployment questions. But one of the things that came up a couple of times last year from our clients who are older, they're collecting Social Security, but they're also self-employed. Let's say it's a realtor who, is still making money. And the question was, if I already collect Social Security, can I still apply for unemployment based on the loss of my self-employed independent contractor income? And the answer is yes, you can apply. However, your Social Security benefit will be reduced by any of the proceeds from these PPP loans you will receive. So essentially, since your paycheck is going to be covered by the government PPP loan, your Social Security is going to be stopped for that time, and then when the loan proceeds is over, your Social Security is going to restart. Now, that's the rule. The technical side of it, I have no idea how that's going to get enforced. The devil is in the details. So will your Social Security check really stop? Is it going to be up to you to tell them that you've got the PPP loan proceeds? At this point, we do not know. But the idea is that, yes, you can apply, but there's going to be definitely, you're not, the idea here is that you can double dip. So somehow it's going to have to work out that way.
Is that going to be the same for if folks have applied for unemployment as well, or just for PPP?
I think I understand that once you receive any sort of income that you said you're not getting and you do receive it, that's going to reduce your unemployment benefits.
Gotcha.
Again, how that's going to get reduced and who's going to work out that formula, no idea. So that's one of the updates that I wanted to bring up for unemployment. The IRA distribution of 100,000. I think the question was, is it per person, per account, per couple? It is per person. So it's not if you have several accounts you want to borrow. It is going to be a total of 100,000 per person. If you're a married filing joint couple, you can do 200,000. So it's 100,000 again per person that you're allowed to take out. Under that. An important thing too with some of the donation stuff. So we mentioned last week that they wrote in a provision where you can take $300 charitable contribution deduction above the line, meaning it doesn't have to go as part of your miscellaneous deduction. So for those that will be taking a standard deduction and donate, you can take $300 donation deduction in addition to your standard. That has been written as a permanent change in the code. So it's not just for 2020. That's going to be allowed going forward until tax law changes again. But that is a permanent provision. So that is a pretty important point to note. The other interesting thing that I read that I wanted to bring up is some of you may get into loan negotiation, whether it be with your mortgage provider, personal residence or business property or investment property or anything like that. It may come as a surprise, but some of these changes in your loan can be considered loan modifications, which can lead to unexpectedly cancellation of debt income. So there are certain thresholds, and Joanne, of course, knows a lot more about this than me from 2008 time. But when there are certain things that make the change in your loan qualify as a modification, and if it qualifies as such, you will come next year receive from your bank a cancellation of debt income, which will be taxable income. So the key now is you may get into some negotiation with your bank about your mortgage or anything like that, is I think just to be careful to not get into any major modification. And if you do, just know that there's a potential that you may get that cancellation of debt income. So that's an important point to bring up. There's a lot right now too on the payroll tax credits. If you're still paying the employees, you're still paying the payroll tax. There's the employee retention credit, the sick time off credit and stuff like that. I just wanted to highlight one more time that if you are going to get the PPP loan to cover the payroll cost, the payroll taxes on that payroll cost are not going to be subject to further payroll tax credits. So it's only going to be on that payroll that is not covered by PPP loan. I imagine that once the PPP loan proceeds are received 8 weeks later, let's say they're forgiven, you're still paying people. You still have your people, but you still haven't fully recovered, and you may qualify for some of these employee retention credits. that payroll tax will be subject to payroll credit. But please, the idea is not to double dip. So please be aware that if you are having your payroll prepared and you're paying the payroll tax, you cannot apply for these credits if you've also applied for PPP loan. And that may hinder also your ability to receive PPP loan if you've already applied for the credits. So I just wanted to bring that up. I think those were the main updates on my end, Joanne. If you want to get into a couple of other things, maybe loan related and maybe
Sure.
some questions.
Thank you. Let me also jump before we get too far off of your topic about the loan modifications. I've gotten a lot of questions in the last few days about deferment of mortgage payments and whether or not that's going to be a good idea. That is absolutely going to be case by case, not only by lender, but by loan program that you are currently in. So you aren't going to know which loan program you're in, which means you're going to have to call the lender. Under the new legislation, there was a requirement that the banks offer a forbearance of 90 days without any impact to your credit. So if you were current and you were not delinquent on your mortgage or other payments before this, now you go late, they cannot ding your credit. However, the law only required that there was a forbearance allowed. The repayment provisions of that forbearance were not described. So what we're finding is that some banks, I'm not going to say most, I'm certainly not going to say all, some banks, many banks, are giving you the forbearance of April, May, June. That's your 3 months. Then come July, you're going to owe 4 months of payments at once, April, May, June, July. So what we want to be careful is that we don't end up in a situation where you've maybe taken the forbearance to allow yourself to stockpile some cash with the uncertainty that's ahead, and then you end up meeting in a pre-foreclosure problem come July when you can't pay 4 months of payments at a time. So not every lender is doing that. I certainly don't want to dismiss this opportunity for folks to obtain those forbearances as long as they're under the appropriate terms. Before you agree to that, you should be calling your lender, requesting to speak to somebody about a forbearance, and then receiving the terms of that forbearance in writing prior to agreeing to anything. So you don't want to say, yeah, sign me up. Same thing with student loans. If you are finding yourself having difficulty meeting any payments, be they loan payments, student loans, credit card payments, anything, always, always, always call the lender first. Many lenders are offering programs for flexibility because of what's going on. But if you just stop paying and don't communicate, that will absolutely result in the worst possible case scenario. It'll make it more difficult to get back on track, and you might lose some of your rights for programs that they do have available once you go delinquent without any notification. So don't just see the headline and run and go request those forbearances. Make sure you make some informed decisions. And those are tough because it doesn't matter who you're calling these days. It's always tough to get somebody on the phone, whether they're lenders or credit card companies, just due to the volume of calls right now. So be aware of that. When Marina was talking about if a forbearance rises to the level of cancellation of debt, like we saw back in 2008, that's going to be if they allow you, in most cases, to either not make that payment or not make some interest. Some of them are forbearing the interest payments. So if there's any part of it that you're not required to repay, that's where you're going to look at that 1099 situation. If anybody gets anything like that and you're uncertain, give us a call and we can help you work through that. So the difference between forbearance and deferment depends on the lender as well. I would say in general vernacular, those two things mean the same thing, but some banks are saying deferment for just the pause button where everything is due in July, and using forbearance if they're going to add those 3 missed payments to the end of the loan, for example. Maybe just continue your loan for 3 months longer than it was supposed to for its maturity date. Keep in mind, the mortgage that's been recorded in the public record provides a hard stop to your mortgage. So this can't just happen with an agreement with the bank over the phone. If they're going to tack those 3 mortgage payments onto the end of your loan, let's say your loan doesn't mature until May of 2045. Now it needs to go to June, July, August of 2045 they're going to have to file a mortgage modification document in the public records, or else for those last 3 months, they wouldn't have any security. So this is a little bit more complex than might meet the eye. It's not impossible to get done. It's just, that's not what's top of mind for folks, is what's the end date on my mortgage when they're working through these things. So just be careful. I wouldn't say there's any rule of thumb with these, except read. Do not enter into any of this without fully reading the documentation from the banks, and you may have to push and pull to get written documentation. In days gone by, when we've had short sales and loan modifications and things like that, it's always been a little bit pulling teeth to get anything in writing out of those larger institutions. So I'll leave that to be on the modification piece. As that develops, we'll continue to keep you posted as well. Now, back to the PPP loan for just a minute. We have had some talk of changes, and we have had some actual changes that we have seen. Some talk that we've heard is, since early last week, we've been threatened that we were going to receive a fourth stimulus bill. That did not happen. We don't know if one is still forthcoming or not. The Secretary Mnuchin requested to Congress to fund the PPP program with an additional $250 billion of funding. So far, that has not happened. That doesn't mean it won't. It just hasn't happened yet. The other idea that's been batted around is that they're considering extending the payroll period from 8 weeks to 12 weeks. Again, up for discussion, nothing final yet. The second it goes final, you'll hear from us. When it comes to the PPP applications, many folks had emailed me and said, I don't have a business bank account, so Bank of America or Wells or Chase, whatever my bank was, they were, pardon me, unable to help because they're processing these through the business side of the bank. Now, while that's frustrating, it's certainly understandable that the banks have to have some kind of guidelines in order for such a big institution to get around these things. So I've had a lot of people who've expressed frustration, saying my business doesn't matter. I've banked at Bank of America for 20 years. They must not care. There's no time for anybody to try to put feelings to this. It's not about caring. It's about how they can process literally millions of these applications at the same time. So I don't have a stake in Bank of America. I don't care if you're mad at them. I just think it's not productive to getting your goals met if we spend time being mad at the institution. I understand it's frustrating. So what we've been trying to do is provide resources. If you meet with that frustration, provide resources where you can get help in other directions. One of the lenders that I had been emailing to folks was a gentleman by the name of Mike Giasone at First Home Bank. He's here local in Sarasota. He asked me to revise my referral to reflect that folks were having to get into a queue to line up for applications to be submitted because they had received literally 8,000 applications in one day just in our area. So they were not able to process them all, so they had to shut down their application process for a couple of days, and then they were asking folks to please get in line. You could file, there was a link that I was emailing folks that said, click here, indicate that Joanne Coons is someone that you know, and Mike Giasone is the lender at First Home Bank, so that the bank would say, okay, there's at least a connection here. When they're trying to prioritize who to help next, they want to prioritize folks with a relationship to the bank. So with that, I got a lot of email back like, this guy can't help me. I'm not going to sit here and wait in line forever. Where else can I go? That was literally the only lender I had. And I just got notice late last night that they have opened back up. So they are back to accepting applications. If you need Mr. Giasone's contact information, just email me and I will be happy to provide it to you. That is a fluid situation, but all I can say is, while it may not help you right now, this is a really great demonstration of why it's so important to have your business properly organized, to have an operating agreement, to have your proper business banking. And while it's tempting to jump on LegalZoom or just go to Sunbiz and form yourself, this is, I don't want to sound like, anybody's being punished, but this is what happens when things aren't done properly. It's more difficult to avail yourself of many benefits of being a business, but certainly in this time of crisis, the folks that were properly organized are still meeting with frustrations, but those who didn't even have a business bank account, from which they operated the business really were met with some serious frustrations and no alternatives. So we don't want to see any of our clients in that situation, obviously. So we want to make sure we get the word out. Please also keep us posted, because we are happy to gather data and share it if you're having different experiences with different banks. I see in the chat that Kathy's saying that Sable Palm Bank was taking new customers with PPP, but not sure if they still are right now. So it's a fluid situation. The good news is we talk to lots of different clients and folks in the community. I'm in touch constantly with the SBA lenders. So we've got our finger on the pulse. We'll share the information as we have it. That definitely is, it's fluid and it's frustrating, which is dangerous, because people are getting more and more concerned about the length of time that it's taking to distribute funds from any of the programs, whether they're unemployment or PPP or the $10,000 emergency EIDL grant. You know, people are saying, look, it's really great the government's passed all these programs, but where is my money? And we hope to see a loosening of that. I mentioned right before the call started that we had a manufacturing client who applied for the PPP loan through Chase. His submission went in on the first Sunday available, which was like the 5th, if I'm looking at the calendar correctly. They got written notification from their lender on Monday that their application was approved. And the written notification said that the funds would be deposited in the oldest bank account at that institution within 3 days. So stay tuned tomorrow and we'll see if that actually happens. But I also found it interesting that they had just said, this was the bank's policy, not SBA, that they would be depositing into the oldest account of that business, so with the bank. So I didn't realize you really didn't have a way to direct which account. Some people only have one business bank account, so it doesn't matter. But I found that to be of interest. So.
Yes, we do encourage you guys to share what your experience is, how soon things are happening for you, which bank is asking for what. We'd like to have that information, because when we do have clients, you know, depending on how this program goes, the deadline to apply for this loan is June 30th. Everybody's applying right now because the funds are limited, but if the program gets extended, let's say there is more money or whatnot, you still have a long way to apply. So the more direction that we have now, the more clients we can help with some advice. Like I said at the beginning of this call, I was a little bit surprised to hear from one of my clients this morning where the bank was asking for an operating agreement, because that was the first time in the last 3 weeks that I've heard that. But this is where you're going to get into, this bank is asking for this and so on. There's still a little bit of the gray area in the independent contractor, self-employed applying.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still a lot more clear of what numbers to put on that application if you are a true business with payroll. And there's a formula, there's a box to fill in and so on. Still a lot of folks that are independent contractors with their 1099s are struggling with, you know, should they be putting gross, should they be putting net? We have not heard anything to the contrary. The way we're reading it and interpreting it is, if you're an independent contractor and you've got a 1099, let's say you're a realtor, you've got a 1099 from your brokerage, that's the 1099 you're going to use as your payroll, essentially, when you fill out that SBA 7A application. So until we hear otherwise, until we hear some people's experiences, we will you know, go with that. Joanne, do you want to touch a little bit on the deduction of expenses potentially?
Yeah, so we've also gotten additional guidance in terms of the IRS rules. One of the issues that has been raised is, and SBA, when they provide their updates, they're doing them through these FAQs that they're providing. So if you want to jump on the SBA website and read those, they are fairly well written. They are fairly English written. They're not super legal easy. They might help you with your sleep, but they also will inform you if you are so inclined. If you're not so inclined, just see us because we're stuck reading them. But with the last round of FAQs that came out, they started to talk about the deductibility of the expenses that you're paying with the PPP funds. So the IRS has said, hey, wait a minute, we're all for helping the folks, but this looks like double dipping. If you are able to pay your payroll and rent and utilities with PPP funds, Sorry about that. I don't know where I went. If you are going to be paying your payroll, utilities, mortgage interest, rent with funds from the PPP loan program, and those funds ultimately are forgiven loan that you do not have to repay, the IRS is saying it's really not fair for you to also deduct those business expenses as though you've paid them, because you've paid them with grant funds, not with your business income funds. That is going to be difficult from an administrative standpoint, from bookkeeping standpoint, to pull out 2 months of rent and utilities. And not difficult, you should be tracking that stuff anyways, QuickBooks or whatever program you're using, but certainly it is going to provide an administrative burden. It's going to be interesting to see. We don't have any guidance yet from IRS on how they're going to monitor that. Some things will be very clear. If your rent is $2,000 a month every month and it's still $24,000 this year, they can tell that you didn't take 2 months of rent out. But we're not sure what the cross-check mechanism is going to be between your PPP funds, what was forgiven, and how to tie that to your particular business tax return. Obviously, it'll all be linked by EIN, but customarily, like in the days of short sales, we had 1099s for the forgiven debt tied to the Social Security number. You could see right away what was going on. They created a special form at that point in time in 2008 on which to report these things. We don't have any idea yet if the IRS is going to create a separate form by where you reflect your total PPP loan, show the portion that was forgiveness, and maybe demonstrate the amount of expenses. We don't know if it's going to be, you put all your expenses on like normal on your either S Corp return or your Schedule C, and then there's sort of an add back on an additional form. That hasn't yet come to fruition, and likely that part won't until the end of the year when the IRS starts to get together drafting the forms for the 2020 tax returns. That's just something to keep in mind, that those expenses may not be deductible because, like I said, they are considering that to be double dipping. Thoughts on the administration of that in addition, Marina, or?
No, I think that's good. We're, still trying to talk to some other professionals to get their opinion on it. And there's a couple of more webinars that are coming up for us to take, also, taught by other professionals with their own different interpretation. So we're just going to keep learning and keep reading and give you guys the latest as it comes. Joanne, have you heard anything from people getting their $10,000 EIDL loan grants? Or I haven't heard any of my clients get them yet.
I hadn't had anybody actually get. I've had several people make the EIDL application. I have had some get correspondence from the lender back to say clarification requested or adjustments, but I haven't had anybody actually receive, that I'm aware of, a response yet.
Okay.
So stay tuned. I know they said aspirationally that you'd have the money in 3 days, but we have some folks that submitted 2 weeks ago or more and still haven't gotten their money. Okay.
Okay.
Any questions, everybody?
Let's check a couple of questions here.
I see that we've got the 10,000 advance was just reduced to 1,000 per employee up to 10,000. Got an email from SBA today. I have seen this information from a handful of people this morning, early emails that I received this morning. I didn't personally get that email from SBA, but we didn't personally apply for EIDL, so we didn't receive that correspondence. But I have seen that from more than one location, more than one client sent that. Okay.
I'm not sure. There's a question on the, is there a way to check the status of that EIDL? I don't, I think they will email.
Yeah, I haven't seen any progress information or anything like that. I have seen people get this letter that was referenced this morning about the $10,000 advance being 1,000 per employee. What's interesting about that is the EIDL program didn't have a required
payroll
number
requirement.
Yeah, so I don't know how they're confirming employees. Maybe for self-employeds, they're just taking the $1,000. That seems
The other thing is the idle loan has always been a good one to recommend for the real estate people. So if you have a real estate portfolio that you do not have any employees, but you've suffered, lack of rent, and now you've got expenses that you need help covering, that idle was perfect for that. And so now if they're back to basing it on employee, now you're back to that not being available. So I wonder if what is getting curtailed here is the advance, not the actual loan. So I would imagine that you will still get approved for some amount of the loan if you fall into the categories that they request. You may just not get that $10,000 free advance that you're counting on. That's what it seems to me that they're trying to police here.
I gotcha. Jackie actually said it is just the grant. That guidance was issued in the SBA Q&A. So it's gross self-employment compensation or salary. Thanks, Jackie. All of this is a good project. So you guys can't see Jackie Durham, one of the other lawyers on our team. You can't see her, but she's working hard, helping Marina and I stay in the lines and keep us all up to speed, because this is definitely a group project. So for the teachers in the crowd, oh my goodness, we are using those skills that we learned. It's been interesting. It's been really, really interesting. So, all right, any other questions? We are going to, as I said, be doing an idle application pop-up webinar tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. So that way we can go line by line if folks have questions. The nice thing about idle is, again, that's based on your business expenses, whereas PPP is based on your revenue. So for those businesses that are, newer or heavily dependent on other expenses, but maybe not payroll, you are still going to have some opportunity to seek some relief there. Okay. All right, if we don't have any other questions, I think we will get back to it, and we will see you Thursday morning at 10 or tomorrow afternoon at 1.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.